Hi, Father Phil here again on our series, What Do We Believe About the Sacraments? So we've come to the last two reflections in this series. And this one is the sacrament of Eucharist. We probably just simply refer to it Eucharist. It is, I think, in our theology and in the history of the ritual development, it is probably the most complex of all of the sacraments, but it's the most familiar. And it's certainly the one that most affects our life as Catholics, both our personal spiritual journey and the life of the Church. So let's begin at the beginning. We believe that the Eucharist had its beginnings at the Last Supper, that meal with Jesus and his apostles. But that meal, in turn, had its roots in the Jewish ritual meal that we refer to as the Passover. And that's a fascinating history, but then this is not about history, so can't go into all of that. But it really is an interesting liturgical, theological history. It was at that meal, at the Last Supper, as we've come to call it, when Jesus announced to his closest disciples, his closest friends, the apostles, that he was giving his life, his body, his blood, for the salvation of the world. Those wonderful words, "Take this, all of you, and eat. Take this, all of you, and drink." This was a remarkable statement and an unprecedented gift that we celebrate every time that we participate in Eucharist. And it gives the word, then, Eucharist, its meaning, thanksgiving, Eucharistine, thanksgiving, to make thanks or to give thanks. And it's the most endearing insight, we believe, about Eucharist. And in some ways, and some people would say, that it also leads to thanks living. I'm going to say a little bit about that in my second reflection. But the Last Supper was also the culmination of many meal events in Jesus' life. One biblical commentator with a bit of wit has noted that Jesus essentially ate his way across Palestine. Many of his memorable teachings and encounters happened at a meal. We think of the feeding of the multitude, such a significant event in Jesus' life that it's recorded in one version or another 6 times in the 4 gospel accounts. We think of the meal at the house of Zacchaeus, one of the times when he invited himself to Zacchaeus' house for a meal. We think of the meal at the home of Mary and Martha and Zacchaeus. We think of the meal at the home of Simon the Pharisee. In that case, he invited Jesus to come to the meal. And the wonderful teaching that took place at that meal about hospitality, about the hospitality of God. At each of these meals and all of the other ones, Jesus reveals who he is and what God offers through him to us. And the meal context is really important because we know what a meal is. We experience that ourselves. Our everyday life, we in some manner or other have a meal. Hopefully with people we love and trust and take care of, and they take care of us. But even in our meals by ourselves, there's something profound. There's something terribly human and terribly divine about the meal. And then after the resurrection, Jesus appears at a number of meal events. The supper at the home of the disciples at Emmaus. Again, a remarkable event. And their comment about how they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. That statement set for us as the church the kind of ground, if you like, of our Eucharistic theology, to recognize Christ in the breaking of the bread. The breakfast on the shore, and that wonderful conversation that he had with Peter about, do you love me? How that is so much part of the Eucharistic experience. These are important events, and they all help us to appreciate and to grasp the profound importance and impact of the Eucharist in our lives. So at every celebration of the Eucharist, we believe that we gather up all of those events into one action as we bring our own hunger and our own thirst to the table of the Lord and consume the very presence of the risen Lord, at the same time being consumed